Welcome to Wired to Hunt's Rut Fresh Radio, bringing you the latest reports from the Whitetail Woods. Presented by First Light, creating proven, versatile hunting apparel for the stand, saddle, or blind. First Light. Go farther, stay longer. And now, your hosts, KC Smith and Tyler Jones.
This is Rut Fresh Radio. I'm your host, KC Smith, and the rut is over. Or is it? Did you know that there is still a lot of rutting action? The bucks are still in the mood if they can find the right doe. Let's see if they're in your state. This is Rut Fresh. Let's go. Welcome to Rut Fresh Radio, y'all. I am your host, KC Smith. We are brought to you by First Light Gear. Tyler Jones is here and in attendance via telecommunication, not telekinesis, maybe. I don't know. He might be capable of that. Mark Kenyon, what's up, man?
It's good to be here. It is good to be here. And when you say telekinesis, the first thing that comes to my mind is Tenacious D. Now, in retrospect, you probably did. You guys, have you ever listened to Tenacious D?
I hate to admit it, but I have.
Okay. Well, There's a good song in there about telekinesis. So, I don't know. That's way
funny.
Off topic.
The one that came to mind for me was a Pokemon. There was a Pokemon that was like telekinetic. Do you remember that, Mark?
I was not a Pokemon player, man.
I can't believe it. Okay, we'll continue on. Yeah,
you're the nerd today, Casey.
I am. I mean, here's the deal.
I love this. This is great. Let's go down this path further. Star Wars,
Pokemon, Star Wars. What else, man? Lord of the Rings. We can go on and on, man. Star Trek, even. I got some Star Trek in me.
He's a lot like Sheldon.
Yeah.
No,
that's
random facts that like are.
Are we talking
weird.
about deer today, though? We are talking about deer, right?
Well, that's in the interviews.
This part's just Star Wars
right.
and sci-fi.
That's right. It's just for the last. But no, this is Rut Fresh Radio, where we talk about the rut and all things fresh, and it's on the radio, right? So, we've been doing a lot of deer hunting. Mark, you've been doing some deer hunting in the coldest place known to man, it seems.
It feels like that today.
Yeah.
It is snowy and like wind chill, sub 10 degrees at least.
Oh.
So, I was actually just out there this morning and my fingers are splitting. I don't know if you guys have that, but when you're outside hunting for so long in that cold, dry weather, my fingers start to actually split. So I just put Band-Aids and like Neosporin on all my fingertips because they're bleeding. Mm-hmm. And it is chilly.
So were you hunting this morning?
I was not hunting this morning.
But you've been hunting a lot.
I have been hunting a bunch. Yep. I was hunting last night. I was out the day before that. And then I took a couple of days off for Thanksgiving. I was hunting most of the week before that. So the last, 7 to 9 days, I've been out there for almost all of it. So It's all been in Michigan. I feel like I got a good sense of what has been going on out here.
Tell us about what's been going on.
Well, I think what I have seen is the beginning of that big shift as we shift out of November and out of the rut for much of the country and into that next phase of the year, which for, those of us up here in Michigan and elsewhere, we're shifting into that late season type of behavior pattern. So, I mean, like I said, I've been out in the woods 10 out of the last 12 days, something like that. And, I was still seeing some of that, cruising, some of that bumping around stuff, in that third week of November and the beginning of the 20s. But the last few days, maybe since the 25th or so, I have not seen anything. The last 3-4 hunts, like ruddy type behavior. Now that can change, right? You can still see that kind of thing happen this time of the year, especially if you get a little doe fawn that pops into heat here. But almost everything has been on a feeding pattern. It's been, every deer coming out at the end of daylight, heading out to go feed in the highest carbohydrate type food source around, and bucks just minding their own business. Bucks just feeding. Does just feeding. It looks like October, right? I mean, they're back on the same things they were doing October 1st, but now it's a different food source and it's much colder and deer are more pressured now. So that's, I think, another thing, right, is we're going back to that bed to feed pattern, but these are deer that have been hunted for 2+ months now. So they're a lot more weary, not moving as early unless you can find those spots where they've been able to evade hunting pressure. Because we're in our second week of gun season here in Michigan, so there's been a ton of hunting pressure. So deer are jumpy. That is definitely another thing I've seen. Like, they're definitely on edge, constantly looking around, constantly thinking they're going to get bothered. So yeah, that's what I'm seeing. We had a big cold front come through. It's been very cold, like I mentioned, and we had snow the last 2 days. So the last 2 days, deer have really been on their feet, hitting the food source. In my case, cut corn. And the day before the snow arrived, that evening before, they really got after it. So
how'd they know?
I don't know if I'm rambling too much, but that's been the sighting so far.
Your listeners are used to that. How did the deer know? I'm just kidding, Mark.
They do. They are.
How did the deer know? This guy kind of said that as a joke, right? But like, seriously, what do you think it is? Why are deer able to predict fronts like that?
My best guess, I think it has to be related to barometric pressure, right? Like, I'm guessing that's the only actual condition change.
What organ are they using to detect the barometric pressure?
That I do not know.
See, this is where, and then maybe this is not really a Rut Fresh type thing, but we're going to dive into it a little bit. I like to think that barometric pressure matters, but scientifically, we should be able to. You like the science, Mark. Like, scientifically,
I'm a science guy.
We should be able to point to an organ that says the barometric pressure is affected, right? And maybe it is like the inner ear or something, and we don't quite understand how it works, right?
Yeah.
But I don't know.
Well, I don't have this issue, but isn't it a pretty well documented phenomena that people can feel the change in barometric pressure? Arthritic people will feel it in their joints.
Yeah.
So when certain pressure systems come in.
My wife had surgery on. She basically has a fake heel bone, and she can feel the weather for sure.
So I wonder if it's something like that.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know. We might need to talk to somebody else who actually studied this stuff or something instead of us just making up some assumptions. But I like it. Yeah. I like the thought of the bone thing.
It would make sense, like, from a evolutionary perspective. Like, for this deer to survive, they have to be well prepared for changes in conditions, right? Like, if a deer wants to make it through a tough snowstorm or years and years worth of tough snowstorms, it would behoove these critters to get on and pack on the food ahead of those things. So you would think that natural selection would eventually select for deer or wildlife of any kind that knows to feed at the right times, or to feed a little extra at the right times. And so I got to believe something like that has led to deer being able to not necessarily predict, but they just get hungry sooner or something when that change comes on them.
Yeah.
I don't know. We can kind of smell like a rainstorm coming in, right? We can kind of feel certain things changing, and they are much more tuned than we are. So
for sure,
I got to believe there's something there.
They don't have as many microplastics in their system, I don't think, and it helps them.
That's true.
Yeah. Mark, it would seem as if you did some good predicting of your own potentially and have been out doing some hunting, but the listeners need to tune in to the actual Wired to Hunt show that launches on Thursday of this week to get the full story.
Yeah, I've got an exciting story to share tomorrow on the main show.
All right, dude.
And so, I'm very excited to share that story. I'm actually going to record it right after we get off the phone here, and it'll be good. It'll be good.
Sweet. So,
awesome.
Tyler,
yes.
Speaking of recording, who have we got interviews with this week for reports from around the country?
Well, we've got Hunter Lindsey out in Kentucky. We actually have two hunters. There's lots of hunters on this podcast, but Hunter Dickens, one of our acquaintances, a good friend of ours that does a lot of stuff with us at the Element, he's out in Texas doing the thing. The dude has had a streak of a year in Texas. Pretty impressive, resume there. Our good buddy Barrett Negus, who is an Instagram friend and now a real friend after we get to talk on the phone. He's in Alabama, which they have weird ruts down there. So it's going to be like a report, that's different than what most of the country's given right now. And then our good friend Scott from Arkansas, he's going to be on here too.
Sweet, man. Let's get this thing going. I'm on the phone with Hunter Lindsey. He's been doing some hunting in Kentucky, and if you ever watched a viral clip of an owl landing on a dude's camera, that's this guy. Hunter, what's going on, man?
Oh, not much. Just doing some chores after I've tagged out in Kentucky.
Oh, man, you let the cat out of the bag. You killed a big buck.
Yeah, I did.
Yeah.
Yep.
Way to go, man. What was that deer doing?
He was actually coming to a field to check for some does. He had been consistent on that side of the farm for a while. We had him on camera, and I finally decided to go in after him, and it worked out at I think it was 3:38 in the afternoon. So I got it done pretty quick.
Golly, how early is that compared to your sunset where you're at?
Sunset's probably around 5:20.
Okay, so he's a good 2 hours before sunset. This deer's out checking for does.
Yep.
And that's pretty much late November, and that's still going on there in Kentucky.
Yeah. It seems like the does in this past week, the bucks were starting to look for those does that were starting to come into that second heat, and it seemed like that was what he was doing. He had finally gotten off that first doe and heat that he had found, and he was coming to find another one out here in this big cornfield with a long hardwood draw through it.
That's cool, man. Do you think that as you look to like what's coming up, is that still on the rise as far as bucks in that seeking mode?
I think that they're still going to be looking for some hot does, but not near as hard as they were, a week or so ago. Mm-hmm. I think, in the next week or two, they're probably going to start moving towards a feeding pattern, but they're probably, they're not going to turn down a hot doe if they find one.
Gotcha. So what kind of food would you be looking to hunt if you were going to be out there in the next week?
Probably some high nutritious greens. Mm-hmm. If there's still some acorns around, then, if you're in a big wood setting, then try and find, some acorns that are left. But those ag fields are, where they plant winter wheat and stuff like that. I think that's a big thing to key on in December.
Is y'all's winter wheat in pretty good shape right now?
It's probably about, 2 or 3 inches, maybe 4 at the highest.
Are you getting some of that cold weather that's coming in across the country?
Oh, yeah. No, it's been in the 30s just about every morning here so far for the past, handful of days. It's been great weather. Highs in the mid to upper 40s. It's just been perfect.
Yeah. Do you think the daylight movement is going to still sustain even though bucks are kind of cooling on the rut a little bit?
That's hard to say. I think that's going to be situational, but I think that this colder weather will definitely help with that more than not. We kind of had some hotter weather towards the beginning of November. I think this colder weather at the end of November will definitely start, and the rut starting to subside a little bit. I think that that's definitely going to help with some daylight movement on some food sources.
That's cool. What do you think about that moon? It's just real big and bright all night long up there.
I've seen that moon phase, helps movement some, but I don't pay as much attention to it as I do, just better temperature and pressure conditions and all that stuff. Some people really focus in on that moon phase. Unless it's just like glaringly bright outside at just all night long, I don't really pay attention to it too much.
Sweet. Well, in the next week, if you had to put a number 1 to 10 on buck movement, what your predicted buck movement is, what would you put it?
I'd probably say a 4 or 5.
Okay. All right. So you think that's a downgrade from this week?
Yes, I think that they're going to start. I think that they're going to be not searching for the does as much as they were this past week. But, it's all situational, and you could be in an area where, there's a couple more hot does than not, and they could just be going crazy. But at this point, I think that the rut is definitely on the downhill side.
Cool, man. Well, thanks for all that great information, dude, and congrats on all the big bucks that have been hitting the ground.
I appreciate it. It's been a good year. It was some ups and downs, but it definitely turned out to be a better season than I thought it was going to be.
All right, I've got a guy that people are familiar with here on the phone. His name is Hunter Dickens, and he is a big contributor on our YouTube channel, the Elements YouTube channel, shooting bucks. At least a couple a year, but this year it's been good for you, man. Actually, there in Texas, where you've been hunting. You had some success the other night, correct?
I did. Texas seems to be the only place I can find success at the moment.
Oh, I don't know about that, but you are doing well there, man. Have you shot? How many bucks have you shot in Texas this year?
3 Texas bucks.
Woo, man, you got it dialed, man.
I've been blessed. Yes, I have. It's been a lot of fun.
Now, the buck you shot through the night was just a big frame, looked like a 8-point with maybe a couple of extras, but like a mainframe 8. What was he doing?
That deer was fresh out of the bed.
Really?
So yes, fresh out of the bed at last light. So I didn't have time to get in there on midday movement. So I got as close to his bed as I could. I'm pretty sure I heard him stand up out of his bed.
Really? What was his? What was the weather like that day?
It was, that day it would have been. I was just wearing a hoodie. I know that. So it was in the 50s to 60s. That's probably what it was that evening.
Gotcha. Did it feel hot for the time of year or normal?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, it was a lot warmer than I would have liked.
Okay. So you think that has to do with the small amount of daylight movement that buck was, portraying?
Yeah, partially. I think the moon has some contributions to that as well, because I've been seeing a lot of midday movement. Kind of that 12 to 1 o'clock hour has been really peaking for me on cameras, which I know you can't go off everything the camera shows you, but I can get a general idea of what movement is. So I've been seeing a lot that 12 to 1, and then I didn't have time to get in, so I went and got as close to his bed as I thought. I knew the general area of where that buck was, and I suspect I'd set up within about 60 yards of his bed.
So talk about the moon, what stage it was in when you shot that deer, and how that affects deer movement in your opinion.
That was, I believe, three days ago. So we would have been right at full moon. And now we're at the backside of the moon, but that was 3 days ago. So I believe that you get a lot of midday movement, and then you get a lot of those bucks who are coming off the rut. This is kind of their final push for the end of November. And so they're going to be doing a lot of zombie walking during the day, especially, midday and in the evening. They're just going to be traveling, looking for that last little bit of does that they can find until the next cycle rolls around.
Gotcha. So you think when he got out of his bed, that was his intention, was to go find does for the evening?
Yes, that was it. And I'd set up on a known travel route for a lot of does. And so he could almost just lay there in his bed and smell does as they came by.
Gotcha.
And so he was just taking more of the lackadaisical approach to it, with it being such warm weather.
Right. So in the next week or so, would you change what you're doing based off of weather, moon? What are you going to do different, tactically speaking?
I would go sit. I would go sit probably 40 yards off the edge of food. I would be really focusing back on food sources for the next couple weeks, and be sitting back on some soft edges to them, or just inside the timber line.
Gotcha.
If you've got food plots, or if you're hunting standing corn, beans, whatever it is, I would be back off that edge, but relatively close to a food source.
Okay. So in the next week or so, if you had to make a prediction on buck movement and you had to rate it on a scale of 1 to 10, what number would you give it?
Probably a 7.
All right, dude.
I like it because the bucks almost become a little bit patternable around these food sources. So they're going to be for a week or two. They're going to be there, and it's if you've got a really good food source, it's going to hold them, because their bodies are deprived of nutrients right now, and they're going to be wanting to build that back up. And especially if you've got good food source, you're also going to have does and yearlings that are going to be coming in later. In a couple weeks, I've got some properties that don't heat up till December.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's good news, man. I appreciate the report, and good job there in Texas, dude. If people are looking forward to seeing those videos on the Element, they will be on as soon as we can get them edited. We're all out hunting like crazy right now, but we're working on them. So, Hunter, thanks for the report, man. I'll be talking to you soon.
Yes, sir. It was a blast.
I've got Barrett Negus here. He's with Long Time Bow Hunting out in Alabama doing some deer hunting. Actually, you're heading to deer hunt right now, right?
That is correct.
Awesome.
Yeah, I got a cold front coming.
Oh, man, that's what I'm talking about. There's usually only a few types of people that like cold fronts on the way in the wintertime, and that's, people sometimes in the South, we're like, oh yeah, we get a snow this year, and then there's deer hunters, and that's us. So, was it your brother that recently had success there in Alabama?
Yeah, it was my brother. He shot one over the Thanksgiving break here a few days ago. Actually, Sunday morning. So yeah,
that's
2
awesome.
days ago.
Man, it's a good buck too. What was he keying in on right there?
Well, he was really hunting in between, I guess you'd call, I think, this deer's two bedding areas. He had showed up a few days earlier, and it was really just like some 5 foot tall, I'd call it just some, it's like a clear cut, but really just 5 foot tall, planted pines, newly planted pines / clear cut, where that deer could kind of move pretty safely between two bedding areas. And there's like a hardwood flat there that we've hunted for years. And, he was moving in between those two areas. I think you guys would call it a DMA, a deer movement area that we've hunted for years there, and, kind of some historical movement. And, he had shown up 2 days before. And so this time of year in Alabama, they're on a pretty good pattern. We're in that pre-rut stage. We're still a month and a half from our rut. So he had showed up 2 days prior, and, he was kind of on that pattern, moving in between two bedding areas.
So when you say bedding areas, is this would you make these more like a doe bedding area or a bedding area that he's inhabiting?
Yeah, so I would say it'd be buck bedding. I mean, it's like 5 foot tall, weedy, I think they planted the pines there 3 years ago. So those pines are getting up. I mean, you can't hunt in them, and those deer, as soon as they walk into it, they disappear, so you'd say a 4-year-old buck like that, I mean, he loves it. As soon as he walks into it, he disappears, Yeah. Kind of like those mature East Texas bucks. Same thing with those mature Alabama bucks, man. As soon as they can walk into some tall grass, CRP type stuff like that, I mean, that's like heaven for them. They walk into it, they disappear. They can lay in it all day, get up at night, feed on acorns or whatever that nearest food. Of course, you can bait in Alabama too now. So the nearest corn pile on the neighbors or whatever it might be. So,
sure. So would you call it pre-rut where you're at?
I would say it's not quite pre-rut. The deer shed velvet beginning of October here, but I see that that testosterone is picking up, and so I feel like they get on this feeding pattern in like October, November, but come December, it's like they know, like it's coming, and it's like this pre-rut phase is like they're certainly on a bed to feed pattern right now. I've seen it with a couple other bucks, and that's why I'm going hunting now. It's because I think there's a few other bucks that might be on that bed to feed pattern right now also. But there's certainly we're starting to see some rub lines pop up. I saw a group of bachelor bucks, like some young bucks. They were just 2-year-olds, but they were locked up, getting excited, especially with these cold fronts. They're locked up, and they were pushing around for 5 minutes.
Yeah. So in the next week, do you think that's going to continue to ramp up with this cold front coming in? Is that kind of ruddy type movement going to continue to increase, or is it going to be about the same next week in your opinion?
Yeah, I think it continues to increase all the way through the month of December. Like,
yeah. So then y'all rut in December,
those scrapes will start popping up. Yeah, those scrapes will start popping up and stuff like that.
Yeah, and the rut for you is when?
The rut will be like the peak of the rut in central Alabama will be mid-January.
Okay. Cool, man. Well, there's still some time left to get on some of that pre-rut movement. The best thing about that is deer are still pretty patternable typically during that, and but they can be a little more. They can show up in daylight more, so it's probably a pretty good time of year. Tell your brother congrats. I got one more question for you. On a scale of 1 to 10, what do you think buck movement is going to be like in central Alabama in the next week?
I would say like an 8. We just came off the full moon, and we have this is like one of the best cold fronts I think we've had all year. We've had some warm weather, so we have this cold front coming, and I think we have a decent moon and a cold front coming, so I think maybe you can get on a good buck the next few days here. So
it's awesome, dude. Awesome.
I'm hoping.
Yeah, well, I hope that it goes well for you too, man, and appreciate the time. We'll be talking to you, I'm sure, at some point soon, man, maybe next year or maybe later this year when the rut's kicking, but appreciate the report, Barrett.
Yeah, thank you, Tyler.
On the phone now, I've got my friend Scott from Arkansas, and Scott has hunted, your whole life in Arkansas pretty much, right?
Yeah, I have. That's about the only place I've hunted.
Yeah, so you know quite a bit. You're as qualified as anybody to probably talk about it. I know you're going to be humble and say, no, y'all do this and y'all do that, whatever. But, Scott, what have you been seeing in the deer woods lately?
If you're in it, you're in it. And I think right now, bucks are definitely on the does. I think we're past the pre-rut and we're into the rut. Arkansas is a funny state just because of water levels and the different terrain that we have. Mm-hmm. So I think really OnX has done a great job at connecting the dots as far as giving you a good rut calendar. And I think they're pretty accurate. I really do. So far, I've just been really impressed with how that connects with what's really going on the ground.
Sure. So do you think the bucks are in what a lot of people consider the lockdown stage right now?
They are. I believe they are. And I think that's one of the reasons why that if you're not in it, you need to move because they're not going far and they're not roaming around like they were, earlier in the month. So yeah, I think they're definitely in the lockdown.
Yeah.
So a lot of times for these southern states, acorn crop is a big deal. Is there a lot of acorns right now, or what does that look like?
Man, we've seen in our area and the place that I hunt now, it's going to be different, because Arkansas is just so varied in terrain and topography. But in the area that I hunt in particular, there is far fewer acorns than I've seen in the last several years. And I think that has to do with water. I just think that there's been a little bit of water shock among some of the hardwood trees around here, which for us is actually better. It's just better. It gives us at least the opportunity to look for feed trees and look for a little bit more condensed movement and patterns that helps us. That way the deer, they've got some places they've got to go if they're going to get into those acorns.
Mm-hmm. Is there an acorn that they prefer, in your opinion?
Yeah, I think, obviously white oaks are a preferred acorn, but water oaks, I have found in my area, they love water oaks. Mm-hmm. And I kind of key in on those. But, as the season goes on, red oaks produce here a lot later in the year. And a red oak tree is usually your friend, especially as the rut advances, because you got to think about it. The buck is pursuing the doe. The doe is still doing doe things. Mm-hmm. And so if you find the does and you find the food source, because the does are still going to the food source, you're going to find the bucks and you're going to be in the mix for the rut. So especially late rut, those red oak trees that are kind of in the open that big old buck wouldn't go near any other time of year, chasing, a younger doe that's come into estrus late. You got a good chance of killing a big deer that way.
Mm-hmm. That's kind of, that's a good point. I think about this a lot, and I have in the past, but especially on like private land, man, if you can hunt food sources, like agricultural food sources a lot of times, man, where the deer aren't necessarily pressured off like they might be on something that's closer to public or more accessible to a public, it's almost like you can get away with hunting deer on ag and close to ag from like September to January in a lot of cases. It's like you really almost, if you had good access, you wouldn't even need to move your set.
No, I completely agree. And I think that's one of the things about the big woods. When you hunt the big woods, and I define big woods as tracts of land that are not influenced by agriculture necessarily. So when you hunt those big woods, I mean, the deer are much more dispersed. It's a much more complex thing. I think predictability as far as like where they're coming from, their travel routes, you don't have that in the big woods. So the deer could show up in a place that you didn't expect it, which affects, shot placement. It affects, everything about you because it's kind of a surprise. Whereas when you have agriculture and you've got, ingress and egress routes and you've got a good way in, you're not having to, bump around and try to figure out where you ought to set up. I think agriculture gives you a distinct advantage in that. But I think when you kill a deer in the big woods and you pursued it and you found it in that environment that it was in, I just feel like there's just like a piece of accomplishment in that. I think there's a piece that just says, I didn't have the advantage of those other things. I'm not saying I disagree with them or it's unethical or nothing like that. I'm just saying challenge-wise, it's kind of like the person that says, I want to shoot, a traditional bow as opposed to a compound bow. I think there's definitely there's a learning curve and it's more difficult, I think, in the big woods.
Yep. So since it's already difficult in the big woods, we got a full moon right now. For the next week, it's going to be, kind of waning, but it's still going to be pretty big. And, you said it's kind of the lockdown thing. So if you had to kind of predict what you thought the buck movement would be like over the next week on a scale of 1 to 10, what would you think it would be?
I don't think the moon, when they're in the lockdown, affects them as much as it does maybe other times of the year because they're going to be doing what they're going to be doing at that particular time. And again, I just look at the rut this way at this phase of it. And the beauty of Arkansas that I've always loved about this state and why I love to hunt here, which obviously I live here, is that when one particular area begins to cool off, you can move. Sometimes it's 20 miles. You go 20 miles and you've got a completely different time frame for the rut. And so it's kind of like chasing the migration of ducks, you're following that rut down. And I think obviously they're going to move a lot at night, but they're nocturnal anyway. I mean, I always laugh when people say, they're just going to go nocturnal. They are nocturnal. Their entire eye structure, everything about them is nocturnal. Them showing up during the day should be the abnormality, but I would continue, obviously you could monitor some of your game cameras and stuff, but I feel like personally, from my experience, I feel like weather patterns affect their movement. I feel like they're up on their feet more. I also think food sources is a really, really important part of this aspect. Because again, the does are going to be doing what does do. If you're in the does, you're going to be in the bucks,
For sure.
Hey, give me that 1 to 10 number. Come on.
1 to 10 for next week?
Yep, for the next week.
Okay, so 10 is...
10 is good.
10 is the best day you've ever had in the woods,
That's
man.
like
or the best day of the year.
The deer jumps in your truck,
I'll say this. I think moving... I think the area that I'm hunting in right now is at the tail end of what's really good. And there's probably a day or two of that left. I think I'm going to probably make a move, and I think you could be in the 8-9.
Ooh, that's a good day. Golly.
It's good numbers. Good numbers.
That gets me excited.
Thanks for the report, Scott. And I'm sure we'll be talking to you soon. It's good to hear from you, man.
Absolutely. Thank you, guys.
Bunch of good info from a bunch of good dudes there. If you haven't noticed, the South Dakota hunt from the Element in 2023 is on the MeatEater channel. There will be a link to that below in the description. Go watch, go comment, and just show us all the love because we really appreciate that. And we just thank y'all for the support very, very much.
Also, Mark has a very important message for you on his main show podcast that comes out tomorrow. Don't forget to tune in to Wired to Hunt and hear that story. This has been Rut Fresh. Keep it fresh.
Wow, down, down, down.